I am super excited this week to be talking to Audra McElyea about her second psychological thriller, If You See Me, that just came out on December 5th. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you'll remember that she was a guest early on for her first thriller, One Little Word, that I absolutely devoured. But If You See Me is about Leighton Marx and Marnie. When Leighton Marx is taken at a festival in front of her loved ones, police are quick to label it a random trafficking accident. But Leighton's husband, Owen, and her ex-best friend, Marnie, suspect that there is more to the story. After Marnie meets Sarah, who saw something at the festival that doesn't add up, she starts looking for Leighton herself, only to uncover secrets and inconsistencies surrounding her disappearance that grow deeper and more complicated by the minute. As Marnie continues to search, she receives threats by two parties with conflicting agendas, and she must decide whether she should risk it all to find her friend or if she thinks it'd be better for everyone if Leighton stays gone after she learns the whole twisted truth. This one had so many secrets. It has an alternating timeline, which is something I'm always a huge fan of. Really complicated female friendship at the heart of the story. And the ending just delivered reveal after reveal. This one was also really special because I got to help Audra with her cover, because another very cool thing about this book is that she self-published it, which I think is just one of the most badass things that an author could do. So it was so much fun getting to kind of go back and forth with her on some like design ideas for the cover, and getting to read it a little bit early and give feedback was really fun too. So I can't wait for you guys to hear our conversation. We talk about the book, we talk about her writing process, and we also talk about self-publishing. So for anyone who is interested in that, there's a lot of cool stuff about that we cover in this episode. That being said, let's get into it. So I am super excited this week because I have another repeat author with me. I have Audra McElyea, who just published If You See Me, and I'm super excited to talk about it. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. This is so fun because
It is so cool.
You're like a friend to me now.
I know. That's the other fun part. So One Little Word was the first book that we talked about that I just like devoured and loved so much. So we had a lot of fun talking about that. But since then, we sent each other DMs. We found out we're almost the same. We're almost the same Myers-Briggs type, and we're just some nerdy bookish introverts who love Taylor Swift, basically. So
Right.
it's so cool now that it's like not just talking to people I don't know. Now it's like people I do know, and then it's exciting to get to talk about.
I think you are the same type as whatever one it is. I can't remember now, but I remember we figured out that you were the same.
Yeah, I'm INTJ, and you're INFJ, right?
Yeah, and my husband's an INTJ too. So like, it's no wonder we get along.
We vibe. Yeah, it's not surprising. All the stars align on this one.
Right.
So I was wondering, this is your second book that you published. Was there anything that you like noted differently in your mentality or your life or anything after becoming a published author and having that first one out?
Well, it didn't really affect how I wrote this book because this book I wrote in 2018, so I wasn't published yet. So I worked several years ahead, but for the writing of this book, it didn't affect that. But the first book I wrote was a dream that I kind of fleshed out. So this one, the process was different. It was like more traditional, like you have to do the work and you have to come up with all the stuff. So, I guess the marketing and everything has been a little bit different. You're not just starting from zero, and I kind of know how things go now. So it's a little bit less stressful in some ways and a little bit more stressful in other ways. Cause with like the music industry or whatever, there's always like the sophomore slump. And so I don't want to be a sophomore slump. So that was my biggest concern, to be honest.
Yeah. That's always like, you just don't even want to have it in your head, but it's in your head because it's like, it's literally a common term. So this one you kind of wrote first, and sometimes that happens. Things get published differently or in different orders, But
Mm-hmm.
with this one, was there like the writing process you mentioned was a little bit different because it wasn't just kind of like fleshing out a dream.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your writing process for this one? Did you plot? Did you
So
pants? What did you do?
I'm definitely a planner, a plotter.
Yeah.
So I wrote One Little Word in 2017, and then this one the next year. So I got
Oh,
right
okay.
into it, right
Yeah.
after. And really, I just came up with the plot like first, like the twisty
Nice.
part of the plot first, and kind of work backwards and like
Mm-hmm.
what's going to build up to this, what kind of characters need to be in the story for it to make sense, and kind of I just start with the twist. And if I don't come up with a good twist that I really like, that I think would be shocking, then I don't
Yeah.
write it. So I just have a lot of notes in my iPhone, and
Yeah.
have like just book ideas, and they're all like a couple of lines.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just pick one that I'm like really feeling kind of in the mood for, kind of like a mood
Yeah.
reader, I'm a mood writer,
Yeah.
and whichever one I think has like the most potential or the most potential for that moment for me to be able to write it well, that's what I'll go
Mm.
with. And then I just start outlining
Yeah.
the plot, like what needs to happen in each
Mm-hmm.
chapter, and fleshing out the characters. My new thing is I like to go ahead and cast my characters based on like
Mm.
actors and kind of what they're kind of known for. Um,
Yeah.
Most actors are typecast in a sense, and
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of know who I would want in that role, and so it helps me develop like their mannerisms, their ticks, their
Right.
obviously their physical appearance, and what kind of mood they usually have and create
Yeah.
for the story. So that's how I go. And then I just, when it's time to write, I have everything out there on my outline that I could possibly have to think of already. So I can just write.
Yeah.
It's mostly just like dialogue and like what needs to happen. So I can get that like crappy first draft out pretty quickly.
Wow, that's really cool. So then from the outline, do you set like a word count for each day? Do you just kind of like be flexible with it?
I try to make each chapter 1 to 2,000 words,
Mm,
and usually it just depends on like if I'm just getting into it at the beginning. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
500 words a day, and then I'll eventually get to like where I can kind of do 1,000 words a day. So
right. Nice.
it's really different for every book and like what's going on in my life at the moment, how sick
Yeah.
I am, and how sick the kids are being.
Yes. All the other
That's
details that
always an
happen in
issue
life.
in this house.
Yeah,
So
you're like, I would love to escape into fiction right now, but people need me in reality.
I know. I know. I have to
Yeah.
take somebody's temperature every
Oh,
hour and yeah, all this stuff.
yeah.
So just life.
Well, one of my favorite things in all of your books that I've read is the way the characters feel very real and like their inner worlds feel like completely constructed. So I'm like I'm always like
Hmm.
very hooked on what's happening to each character basically.
Hmm.
Do you do anything specific to kind of like make them feel that kind of real, or does that just kind of come while you're writing it?
I have certain songs that I'll put
Mm,
like a soundtrack playlist,
yeah.
and I'll just like listen to those songs like for each character as I'm
Mhm.
writing them, so I can really like just pretend like I'm them and like what would I be doing and all of that kind of stuff. So what do they call that in acting? Where you're
Is that method acting?
yeah, it's kind of like
Yeah,
method writing.
I like that. That's cool. I mean, like, it checks out. There's I just saw the Hunger Games prequel movie that's in theater right now.
Oh yeah.
So now all of my TikTok is like all kinds of like behind the scenes trivia and stuff. And that was
Well,
one of the
that's
things that like three or four of the main characters were talking about was that they all made playlists for their character that they like listened to when they were like
right.
about to be on set. So
Yeah, it
you're basically an
helps.
actor.
I mean, I basically am a professional actor
Yeah.
now. Not
Yeah.
really. But yeah, it does
I mean,
help.
kind
But
of.
it kind of can dampen your mood a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, if you're in like
If I'm
a
like in my
sad or
reputation
serious.
era, like writing a villain or something, and then my husband's home, and I'm like,
Yes. I'm like, shut up.
what
Be
did
a
I
king
do?
over here. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. You've also, and we talked about it in the first episode, you draw a lot of inspiration from Hitchcock, and
Hmm.
I feel like that really, like, your books have like a really specific feeling of like kind of suspense and like creeping dread, and you're kind of like worrying
Right.
about whatever could go wrong. Was there
Hmm.
anything directly Hitchcock related for this book that you can think of?
I
And
mean,
there
I
might
try
not
to
be.
always do what?
I said there might not be. It might just be you've
There
captured the
might not.
feeling so well.
I think just in general, like my writing style tends to be a little more suspenseful than like just go ahead
Hmm.
and like giving you the dark and gory scenes. Like I pretty much
Yeah.
like allude to a lot of things. A lot of things like the gory things or whatever have happened in
Hmm.
the past. So I'm not really acting like those out as the
Hmm.
character. Like, of course, I don't really have a scene where anybody's like stabbing anybody, but like it wouldn't be like specifically spelling that out in the scene. It would be like looked at from, a future sense or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's more, I know there's a quote by Alfred Hitchcock, but I'm going to butcher it. But basically, the gist of what
Mhm.
he's trying to say is like the suspense of what might happen is usually more fear inducing than the actual thing
Mhm.
being like laid out in front of you. So your mind will
Yes.
come up with a lot more things that could be going on than
Yeah.
if you spell out what is going on. So I try
Yes.
to leave some of that to the imagination while
Hmm.
giving you enough to go off of as well.
Yeah.
So it's definitely they're thrillers, but they're a little more on the milder side, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, dark things
They're not
happen. It's
violent. They're not
not.
super violent. Yeah.
No, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
kind of
know what
always
you're
will
talking
have
about.
that. I'll kind of always have that mood atmosphere in my books,
Yeah.
and then I like to dive deep into the characters, kind of like a women's fiction writer would. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just all laced with suspense. So
Yeah. I think that's a really good way of putting it because it does, yes, like some of the women's fiction I've read, I don't read tons of it, but it does feel that way. Like you are like very
Mhm,
attuned to like what's going on in the character and like very emotionally
mhm,
attuned as well. But there's like definitely creepy stuff happening too,
right.
or whatever word we want to use. But I do remember, I can't remember exactly what it was, but when you just brought up that Alfred Hitchcock quote or style, there
Hmm.
was something I watched at some point that was like a documentary on movies of some sort, is what I feel like it was. But it was showing that. So it was showing how he kind of brought that to cinema, where like you
Hmm.
have someone, what comes to mind, and I feel like I saw this forever ago, so I'm probably butchering it, but like someone's sitting in an office and you're just like hearing the footsteps, like someone is approaching
Hmm.
them down the hall, and like just because it drags out, you're just sitting there and you're like, oh my gosh, who is about to like walk into this person's office, what are they about to do? And so you do have that like extended period of like feeling the suspense, even though the suspenseful thing isn't directly happening.
Hmm.
And that is a lot of what your books feel like. So
Right.
definitely
He
whatever,
is he was
or
like such an
whatever that quote is.
interesting, and this has nothing to do with books, but like I
Yeah.
guess it does in a sense because there's like a similarity, but like a lot of his shots were like from overhead and things like that.
Ooh.
And I was recently watching, I think it was Murder on the Orient Express, like the newer one. And they did a
Yeah.
lot of like shots looking down. It was shot, like on a
Nice.
train car. And
Yes.
they were looking down where you could see all the different rooms, but it's like an overhead shot. And like Hitchcock was
Ooh.
really good about like those interesting shots to
Yes.
where your POV is just like
Yeah.
abnormal. So
Yeah.
I
They did
like to
some like
try
that.
to like incorporate little things like that into writing
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
translate the same but differently.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. There was a show that, I mean, I'm still obsessed with it. It's done airing, called Mr. Robot, that did a couple of those kinds of shots where it was like
Hmm.
clearly the set was like actually a house, like a
Hmm.
floor plan with like the roof cut off.
Right.
And so you would be like knowing what was happening over here, and then the
Yeah.
camera's moving to what's happening over here, but the person you left doesn't know anymore like what's coming towards them. So
Right.
good. So good.
I like
And
that. And like in this book, I did not every scene is like this, but kind of like the movie Vantage Point. If you've seen that, where
yes.
like it's
Yes.
reacting the whole like thing and just from a different vantage point and how it can be so different. But there are a few chapters, I want to say like maybe one or two that I do
Mhm.
like the exact same scene from the other. I think there's
Mhm.
actually two or three from the other
Yeah.
person's vantage point and like revisit
Yes.
those scenes. So I like to do, you don't want to do that too much because it can get repetitive
Right.
and only like, Evelyn Hardcastle can do it in like the
Oh my gosh.
grandest way. I
Yes.
can't do that. Like I would, that would be too hard to tackle, but like that was
Yeah.
done beautifully. But I like to do a little tidbit of that here and there just because, our perspective is just so huge on how like we live our life and like we don't understand how other people will see a situation. It can be so different and like people can
Mhm.
mean things in such a different way. And
Yep.
I think that's something cool about like knowing your personality type. And I try to like
Yeah.
really dive deep into those people's personality types and understand like
Yes.
what makes them tick and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's really fun, like the psychology behind
Mhm.
everything and what the characters do and why and all of
Yeah.
that.
I am obsessed with the fact that you made a Vantage Point reference because I was obsessed with that movie when it came out. I was like, this is brilliant. I love it. And I
I know.
was like, I was young and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I didn't even know how much I was going to love thrillers and thrillers that kind of work that way. But
Hmm.
it's one of those things. I think you cycle through like six or seven, like lots of people in
And
that movie.
it didn't feel like, oh, not again.
No.
It's like,
Yes, yeah, and, like, you really are getting, like, different revelations, and I think I just always love because sometimes, even as, like, an overthinker, to even, like, pull it back to that, I think sometimes I like seeing how different perspectives could be because sometimes it means you're wrong too, and, like, sometimes you
yeah,
want to be wrong about, like, an overly anxious thought, and so,
yeah,
like, being able to get into other people's state of minds can help you see
mm,
situations so differently. And there is to you in this book. I even texted you when I think when I was reading the chapter. There are a lot of dynamics going on. Without trying to spoil anything here, but there was kind of like an argument going on between two characters that like
hmm,
we've learned a lot about both of them at this point, and you kind of switch back and forth between the perspectives within the argument. And like
hmm.
every time I was in someone else's perspective, I was like, see, she's right. And then I was in another, and I was
I
like,
know.
no, see, she's right. So like
Yeah,
I was completely sold on like both of their perspectives enough that like in the scene, I was like, I don't even know who I agree with at this point.
yeah. That was
I love that.
exactly the intention. So it's just like, wow, I
Yeah.
really like 100% on this person's side for a minute, and then
Hmm.
you can flip flop so easily just based
Yes.
on there's always things you don't know that go on behind closed
Hmm.
doors that they'll reveal, and it's like, oh, well, that's why she felt that way, or that's why he
Yeah.
felt that way, and
Yeah.
that's why they did this, and this is what they really meant, and so it's
Yeah.
it's cool to revisit some scenes from
Yeah.
different vantage points. I love it.
Yeah. And it
I'm
kind of
very
makes
inspired by film.
right, clearly. I mean, well, the it reminds me too anytime I talk about like show stories that accomplish the like making you care really deeply for multiple characters. There's a show called
Mhm.
Shameless on Showtime, and it does it so well, where it's like there are six siblings, maybe, and all of them are in like a rough position because of who their parents are and how useless the parents are. So all of them are having their own like life dramas. And so sometimes you're in one scene with them and you're like, man, I'm so pissed that their brother did this to them. And then you go into like what's happening in their brother's life and you're like,
Yeah,
oh man, like now I know why he was being like that. So it's almost a way to have like multiple stories in the
yeah,
same story, even though it's all the same overarching story. So
yeah.
I love
Yeah, I
it.
think Christopher Nolan does that brilliantly as well.
Yes.
If you've ever
Yeah.
seen like Memento or
Hmm.
Inception, Interstellar,
Yes.
The
Oh my
Prestige, I mean,
gosh.
like he's just brilliant. Like he's
I
probably
know.
my current like Hitchcock that I like to
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah, I've been thinking that's funny you
Doesn't
brought up
sound well.
Interstellar because that's another one where like I watched it when it first came out, but I haven't seen it since. And we saw
Mm-hmm.
something and I was like, I feel like I would enjoy watching that again. I also remember it
Mm-hmm.
wrecked me. Like I remember just crying a bunch.
I know.
So
I
clearly
know.
he had me totally hooked on the characters in there as well.
I like
Um
to think that hard. So if you like books where you have to think kind of hard,
yeah.
you'll like mine probably.
Yes.
'Cause I don't.
Yes,
It's
especially
just
this one.
yeah. It's just like I don't want like just a run of the mill thriller. I want you to
Right.
have to be thinking about it a few days after. Like, wait a minute, I'm just not
Yeah.
putting this part together. Like, oh, okay, you know. So
Yes.
I really like that. So if you want an easy read, it is
Yeah.
an easy, quick read, but it's like it'll make you think.
Yeah, and the timeline is like very complex for anyone who
Yeah.
likes because I like that in a story as well when you kind of are getting multiple perspectives and you're finding out information kind of in disjointed order.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot to keep track of, but in a really fun way.
Hmm.
Like I still didn't want to put it
Yeah.
down when I was reading it.
Yeah. It
So
is.
with
It is.
this,
It's complicated.
it is. So with this one, you are self-publishing it and you created your own imprint for it and you have
Mhm.
just done all of it, which I think is one, I think it's like really empowering that it's possible. And like as someone who kind of has something I'm writing, I think I'm really intrigued by the idea of how possible it is to self-publish. So,
Mhm.
what has your experience been like with that?
Well, I traditionally was published with One Little Word, and
Mhm.
which was exactly what I needed at that time. So I didn't know how anything worked, like nothing. And so now, when I was, I guess this summer, when we were in an editing stage of this book, I
Mhm.
ended up parting ways with my publisher that I was with.
Mhm.
And so my agent was like, okay, we're going to just send this out to, big five publishers, mid publishers, whatever. And, and I was like, okay. And then I came back like the next day and I was like, even if we find a publisher right now, it's going to be like 2 years before I have another book out. And at that point, it's already been like a year and a half since One Little Word came out. So instead, I gave her my next book, and we will probably put that out on submission soon. And then I was
Yes.
like, I'm going to try my hand at this one by myself. And
Yeah.
so over the course of like 2 or 3 months, I created a press for myself, an imprint, whatever you want to call it. It's called Counterplay Press. And as I got into it, like I had so much fun.
Nice.
I loved having the control. I created my own
Yeah.
cover, and obviously you helped me a lot with
Yeah.
that. You
Just a
were
little.
honestly, I probably wouldn't have this book out right now if it weren't for you
Oh my
and
gosh.
Kirsten Modulin, because you guys both were like, you can do this. Like, I know you can.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
helped me, like, gave me feedback on,
Mhm.
the book itself. And like, you helped me a lot with my cover. Like, you,
Yes.
like, down to like, you need to use sans serif on this part.
Yes.
It'll look better. And it
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Um, so
You had a
honestly,
really good start though. But yeah.
I had so much fun with it. Like I really
Yeah.
did. And as I got into it, I got all, I learned how to format my own book and
Yeah.
gosh, what else is there? I mean, as an author, you're pretty much doing your marketing and all that kind of stuff already. So that's
Mhm.
kind of the same. You can kind of elevate that a bit. But what I'm wanting to do long term is
Mhm.
create I don't know if I don't really want to own people's rights, but I want to
Yeah.
help other people learn all the things that it took me, all these months to learn how to do. With
Mhm.
the state of the economy kind of going how it is and
Yeah.
publishing, um, they're probably going to be taking less authors on. They're probably going to
Mhm.
have layoffs with editors. Like, I just like the way things are going right now for
Yeah.
our country and probably the rest of the world too.
Mhm.
um, you know, it's just not that great. So
Yeah. Yeah.
while I probably will still put my third book, I guess, on submission and kind of see where
Mhm.
that's taking me. The direction I'm thinking, whether that happens or not, is I
Yeah.
would like to be able to help people learn how to do this themselves
Yeah.
without owning their work. I want people to own their own
Yep.
work and know how to do this themselves, and I can kind
Mhm.
of hold your hand and help you through it somehow. So I'm not
Yeah.
really sure what that looks like exactly. I'm kind of
Yeah.
working that out. But
Yeah.
I just want to create a company that will treat authors how I would want to be treated.
Right.
That can really empower you and give you the tools to be able to do this yourself and own your own work. Because
Mhm.
what things that people don't talk about is like whether you're with a big fat publisher or a small publisher, at the end of the day, you're
Yeah.
making about $1 a book. And when you're self publishing, you own
Yep.
your own rights, you have complete control over everything, and you're making about 6 to 7 times more. So unless they
Yeah.
can elevate your stance in the industry and get you in front of
Mhm.
6 to 7 times more people, at the end of the
Right.
day, like financially, you're not going to be making as much money. And
Right.
you're going to be waiting about 2 years at best in between
Yeah.
books. So, when you look at it from a financial standpoint and look at the numbers, Kirsten Modulin is a really good example of this because she has like
Mhm.
41 books out, and she's just insanely talented and business
Yeah.
minded, technologically savvy, and all the things. And not everybody can figure that out.
Right.
I don't claim to be the best, but I'm learning. And, I'm
You
very
did it.
inspired by her. And, once you get a lot of books out, that's how you start building your revenue. Your next book will sell your last
Right.
book, and then people will look at your backlist and things like that. Um,
Mhm.
and so it's just financially
Mhm.
and just how I would like to put out a book a year, maybe even like a book every 9 months, 6 months
Yeah.
at the least.
Right.
Because I tend to have a lot backed up, and it's like, okay,
Yes.
let's get this show on the road. Like I want to go.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel. But I was reading this week because obviously I'm from Knoxville, and Dolly Parton's like a
Mhm.
huge figure here. And I was
Yeah.
reading some things about her the other day. And at 20 years old, she made her own publishing company, and so she
Wow.
owns every bit of her work
That
from
is
when she was
so cool.
20 years old.
That
Like
is
how
amazing.
brilliant. Like she thought of
Right.
that so long ago, with all the Taylor's
Yes.
version stuff. And
That's what it's making me think of.
that's been really inspiring to me because
Mhm.
I think artists should own their own work.
I know.
And, it's a little bit different in the music industry, but
Mhm.
it's also a lot the same. So that's why on my like website and my like merch, it's like books, Audra's version. Like I'm really
Yes.
excited about owning my own stuff. So
Yes.
that's a direction I want to help other people be able to go in if they want
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I think those are all really cool points because it is just a more common conversation, whether it's music or books, really
Yeah.
any art. It is a more common conversation now of like what does the creator get to keep and like how what kind of ownership do they
Mm-hmm.
have, and it's kind of like yes, bigger corporations, whether it's like a record deal or a record company or a publishing company, they
Mm-hmm.
have benefits and they can get you in
Yeah.
front of people, but like the way the internet is now, there's also just so many different ways to find your people. And to your
Right.
point, where if you have just book idea and you're like getting backed up with book ideas, like
Mm-hmm.
why go through a process that makes things maybe take longer than they need to be because they're like,
Right.
oh, we're already releasing something like this year, so you're gonna have to wait until next year. And you're like, but I wrote it now and like I want to get it out there. So it feels like, especially with the internet, it's just like if you love writing, you are writing, you have stuff to get out there and you can find your
Mm-hmm.
people. It's such a cool way to go
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, I mean, because we had before I parted ways with my publisher for If You See Me,
Hmm.
we had planned a December release, and
Oh.
when we parted ways this summer, I was like, yeah, I really still want to do that. And for a week
Hmm.
or two, I really just like was torn about like what I want to do. We want to send it out, and then once I figured
Mhm.
out like it's gonna be like at best 2.5, 2 years before it's gonna come out, I was like, no, I want this to like I don't want a
Yeah.
huge gap in between my books, and
Right.
so we'll send out the other one, and this one I'll do myself and see how it
Yeah.
goes. And I've had, like I said, I've really honestly had the best time.
I like it seems like it's been really cool seeing you like just go through all of it and just still figure all of it out. Like you said, it could
Yeah.
be really intimidating to be like, oh, there are all
Hmm.
these things I'm gonna have to do. But it's like someone in a publishing house went ahead and did all of it. So it's like
Yeah.
I can probably learn how to do it. And I love
Yeah.
that you kind of like the idea of helping other writers, not just like
Hmm.
buying the rights from them and stuff. Kind of just being
Right.
able to help more people do that.
Right. Like I would like just, I don't know how it's going to end up being played out, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like a fee and like I help you set things up and
Yeah.
I have everything outlined that's like this is how you do your formatting, this is how you can create your
Yes.
cover and where you what you need to do it and that kind of a
Right.
thing. And like I don't want to make money off your book. Like
Right.
you need to
Right.
own those rights yourself. Like you did all
Yeah.
that hard work. Like this
Yes.
business side of it is important, but to be honest, you can learn that in a few months.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of just
It
like
probably
how
took
much
you how many years to write it and edit it and like put your
right.
heart and soul into that. Like you need to own that.
Yeah, that's yeah, I would feel that way. Like if there's a way to keep the ownership, like
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're kind of talking about Taylor's version because, of course, we're going to talk about Taylor on here. But you have always snuck little Taylor Swift references
Hmm.
into the books. I was highlighting them when I found them. Does that like come to you in the moment when you're maybe like writing the scenes, or to your point about the playlists? Do you kind of know what you want to include because of the characters that you're creating?
It really just comes to me. Like it's kind of
Nice.
like in regular conversation with anybody, anywhere, doing anything, I'll always like
Yeah.
have a Friends reference or like a Taylor Swift
Yeah.
lyric reference for literally everything. It like drives people
Yes.
bananas. And half the time, nobody even knows what I'm talking about. If it's a Friends
Yeah.
reference, my husband will always know.
Yeah.
Um, but the Taylor Swift references is usually just me like laughing with myself.
Yes.
I don't know. Like I
Yeah.
just can't. I can't not think of them.
I know. I know. Like at this point, we're all thinking of them.
Yeah, I know, like the whole like Roman Empire thing. Like it's
Hmm.
Taylor Swift for all of us.
Yes. Yes. It's like I was just talking to Manny McHugh, who just had It Takes Monsters come out, but I think I highlighted like 16 different pop culture references. Like she just sneaks them in there and I
Yeah,
just love it. I love books that
I
are
love it.
able to like reference stuff in a fun way. Like
Yeah,
I know some people are like, don't even want like cell phones in books. They're like, I've seen such strange things of people like, I don't want a cell phone in a book, or like, I don't want the real world in a book. And I'm like, I think it makes it cooler and kind of like, sometimes it's a nod to other pieces of art anyway. And like, I think that's
yeah,
always super fun. So
yeah. I
I
like
love
to put
fun
little
time.
nods to like movies or people who are inspiring to me
Yeah.
because they deserve it, and it's
Yeah.
just fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw something, and I can't remember. It might have been a podcast I was listening to where he was saying to be an artist is to be inspired by the artists before you and like all
Yeah,
of that art as well. And I was like,
yeah,
that's a really good way. Obviously, you don't want to
hmm,
copy anything, but it's like we are kind of all inspired by other people's art,
hmm,
and that makes us create stuff. So I think it's
yeah.
fun when there are all the cool references.
Yeah, I like sometimes I feel sorry for Taylor because I'm like, well, who does she listen to?
Oh my gosh, I know. Like herself.
Like nobody has the career that she's had. Like she
No.
probably like is like, oh, I'm gonna listen to this day, but like, and maybe an album or two, but like she
Yeah.
has so many like works of art that are
Yes.
just like brilliant. It's just like you can
Yes.
pick any album and like listen to it over and over and over. Like, who does
Yeah.
she have that to do with?
I know. I know. My Spotify Wrapped just came out and I just saw that I spent 7,500 minutes listening to her this year. So
I would hate to
who
know. I'm probably the only person that doesn't do the stream. Like I have Spotify, but I pretty much use it
yeah.
for like podcasts, but
Yep.
I just like buy everything on iTunes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to
No, that
own
makes sense.
I want to own it. And like I went and
Yeah.
bought like Friends kept changing like where they were going to be, like
Oh,
HBO
yeah.
Max or Netflix or whatever. So I like go
Oh,
and
you're right.
buy the Friends like for nine like it was one Christmas I like bought on iTunes or
Yeah.
Amazon Prime or something. Like I bought it. So like wherever it's going to streaming, like I don't have to worry about
Yeah.
it because I have it. Maybe I
Yeah.
have like a control problem or an ownership problem
Maybe.
because I like, just want to have my thing and not be confined
Yes.
to like streaming service.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. My main thing was some of the podcasts I had on that I listened to on Spotify. You can only listen on Spotify anymore. So
Really.
that when they like acquired a bunch of podcasts, it was brilliant because it changed my habits. I was like, oh, okay, fine.
Yeah.
I'll just pay so I don't have ads on my podcast. Oh, and I get access to all this music. So,
Yeah.
but I totally get where you're coming from. I would do that with shows too, because like they do just change like where
I
they're being
know.
streamed all the time.
So if it's something I love, like I just want to have it.
Yeah, yeah. You're like, this isn't gonna go away.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I know you've mentioned that sometimes when you're writing, you don't read as much, so that you're not. I've heard a couple people say that they just don't want to like
Yeah.
have other people's ideas in their mind. So
Mhm.
if you haven't been reading anything, you can just say like a TV show or movie. But I've been asking everyone what they've read or watched lately that they've loved.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm such a dork. Yeah, I haven't been reading very much
Same.
because I have been doing a lot of writing stuff,
Nice.
and I'm trying to flesh out my fourth book right now. I'm kind of in like the outlining stage, so I'm not
Yeah.
reading.
Yep.
Um, I'm trying to think like what I have watched that's like not super nerdy. So what I did recently,
It can be nerdy.
I'm always nerdy.
Yeah.
I grew up watching like a lot of old things. And so I
Mm.
went back and I watched the whole first season of like the 1976, 78, whatever year it is of Charlie's Angels and loved
Oh
it.
yeah.
I loved it
Nice.
so much. I just did that like the whole last couple of weeks during my workouts
I love
and
that.
like, absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I really like, I mean, these are like not anything to do with thrillers, but Real Housewives of
Mhm.
Beverly Hills. I'll go back
Oh
and
my
watch
gosh.
some of like the old
Same.
ones. It's just so fun to
Yeah.
like have to think
I
and just
completely
like
agree. Like,
watch a guilty pleasure.
yes.
It's funny because I
And
like
fight
to
over
watch
like
like
the
comedy
silliest
type
stuff.
stuff, but
Yeah.
Only Murders in the Building. Like I watched that. I
Mm.
binged that recently. The whole was that the third season? Third
Heard.
season? Yeah,
Yeah. They
and
have so many big actors in it.
it was fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it so
Yeah, they have
much.
great chemistry on that set.
I love
And
it.
it's
I've
another one where
always
it's like, yeah,
loved.
there's a murder, but you're kind of laughing and it's just like it's kind of mindless still for the most part. And you don't have
Right.
to think very hard to like follow what's happening.
And this week I've kind of been watching. It's always like during my workouts when I want to zone out,
Mhm.
but it's the BuzzFeed Unsolved Mysteries show
Ooh,
with the
okay.
two guys. I can't remember. One of them's name is Ryan. One of them's name is something else, and
Okay.
they talk about these really famous unsolved mysteries
Uh-huh.
and like the narration during like what happened when they're going over like what happened is like really serious, and then like they just make like the funniest jokes about things, about all
That's
the
awesome.
theories that they have. It is absolutely hilarious and kind of scary at the same time. Like I don't know how they have managed to do that. It's kind of like Only Murders in the Building, and where
Yeah.
it's like that same formula. If you like
Okay.
that,
Yeah.
you would like the show. But it's unscripted, but it's
Nice.
hilarious and I love it because it gives me lots of good ideas without like scaring me super bad
Nice.
about
That
all the
is
true
so cool.
crime type things. Yeah.
Nice. It says
So
Shane and Ryan. I just pulled it up.
Shane and
I'm gonna
Ryan,
add
they
that.
are
I'm gonna add that to my list.
hilarious. Like it is
That I
so
love
good.
that when you can combine like comedy and an unsolved mystery.
I mean, those two guys, like, I'll be like just like cracking up walking on the
Yeah.
treadmill, like a bit over laughing. Like the thing,
Yes.
whatever sense of humor they have is what I have.
Yeah.
Like
Oh my gosh.
stupid sense of humor.
I'm
silly.
like totally gonna add that. It's the
It's
one on YouTube.
You'll have to let me know what you think about it because it's. I think
Yeah.
the first season Shane is
Uh-huh.
not on there, and whenever
Okay.
it's those two, it's perfect. I want to
Okay.
say there's the first season without him, and maybe there was somebody else. I can't remember because I'm on like season 7 right now.
Okay.
Um,
Nice.
but whenever it gets to where it's those two, is where it really is like just pure magic. Like love it.
I love that when you find people that just have like fun chemistry. There's
Yeah,
so much to watch. You just
I
like
know.
added everything to my watching queue.
I know. And Charlie's Angels like really held up for me. Like I was
That's
like,
cool.
it
'Cause
was
that
the
doesn't always
70s, and
happen.
it's like, a lot of the situations they're in are
Hmm.
like men, like kind of like maybe giving them unwanted compliments and stuff. And like, especially
Yeah.
Farah, like the way she would respond in like such a like witty, like, I'm going to put you in your place kind of a way for the
Yeah.
70s was just like so awesome to see.
Yeah.
And like just having them in the position of power in the show was, I think it
Right.
was done pretty
You're right,
well,
it is.
especially for the time.
Yeah, that's what it was really dawning on me because I still have that experience sometimes when I hear about like badass women doing stuff in the 70s. I'm like, that was like thinking outside the box back then.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. I love
I
that. I
was
love when I
like,
get to see that there's still some of it even back then.
yeah, like I loved it.
That's
And
cool. I'm
Farrah
gonna have to.
Fawcett was just like, I don't know, she just had that it factor where
Oh yeah.
she was smart and funny and beautiful and like just seemed like a
Yeah.
really sweet, genuine person all in one. And it
Yeah.
was just like a magical formula for their casting too.
My gosh, you might have convinced me to watch that now too. I do need shows
It's
like at
really
night
cute.
for like going to sleep.
Yeah. It's a good
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah.
I
I
love it.
love it. I'm adding it to my list. Well, where can people follow you so they can stay up to date with all of these books that you're writing?
Literally everywhere. I
Yeah.
have links on my website to like Goodreads, BookBub,
Hmm.
TikTok. I can't call it X. I'm just gonna call it Twitter for the
No
rest of
one
my
does.
life. I don't really use it, but it's good for like
Yeah.
searching current events and news and stuff, so I still have it.
Right.
Um, Threads, Instagram, all the things. I don't do
Yeah.
Snapchat or anything like that, or
Yeah.
the Be Real. I don't do that.
Mm-mm.
Um, but yeah, or I mean, it's all on my website. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Instagram and TikTok are really my favorites, probably.
Same. That's where I spend most of my time for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, reading too, but as far as
right.
social media, those are my favorites.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'll put your website link in the show notes and then people can find everything there and hopefully go read If You See Me right now.
yeah.
Um, but I am excited to see you on a podcast again with your next book. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Between the Lines. And if you did, the biggest thing you can do to support the podcast is to go rate and review it on whatever platform you listen on. You can also follow me on Instagram at the girl with the book on the couch. And if you still need more thrillers in your life, check out Killing the Tea, my other podcast where I talk to my friend Gare about literally everything we read.